The Texas sun was at its zenith, blazing mercilessly down upon the small town's community hall. Outside, the leaves of the oak trees shimmered in the heat, and the dust kicked up by arriving trucks had finally settled in the yard. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. Today, two powerful families, the Smiths and the Kennedys, sat on opposite sides of the aisle. The tension in the room was palpable, a thick electric haze that made the air heavy. Family members, local leaders, elders, and townsfolk had gathered to witness the verdict. A long carpet ran down the center of the hall, acting as a demilitarized zone between the warring factions. On the left sat Michael Smith, dressed in a white button-down and jeans, a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He looked defeated. Beside him sat his eldest son, Samuel Smith, the man accused of murder, head bowed in silence. On the right sat the Kennedys. Their eyes burned with a mixture of grief and fury. Leading them was Henry Kennedy, clad in a black t-shirt that strained against his broad shoulders and dark jeans. He was a figure of imposing strength. His face was a mask of stoic sorrow, but his dark eyes, pools of deep agony, were fixed unblinkingly on the Smiths. The mediator, an elderly man with a weathered face, stroked his white beard and took a deep breath. "Michael Smith," he began, his voice grave. "Your son is a killer. Do you wish to pay in blood, or will you accept the penalty?" Michael's voice trembled. "We are ready to pay the blood money, sir. Whatever amount you name, we will pay." At these words, Henry Kennedy's patience snapped. He slammed his hand onto the table and rose to his full height, the sound echoing like a gunshot through the hall. "My brother's blood is not so cheap, Michael Smith." Henry's voice was a thunderclap, rolling through the room. "You think you can trade cash for my little brother's life? How is that even possible?" Dead silence fell over the meeting. All eyes locked on Henry. His fists were clenched white, his eyes red-rimmed, his voice carrying the terrifying calm of the eye of a storm. "I don't want your money, Michael." Henry stepped forward, towering over the older man. "I want a life for a life. I want a bride." The hall gasped collectively. For a moment, the only sound was the whirring of the ceiling fans. Michael Smith's face went pale. Samuel looked up for the first time, then squeezed his eyes shut in shame. "This is cruelty," Michael pleaded, practically begging, clasping his hands together. "For God's sake, have mercy on my family's honor. My daughter, she is just a child." Henry's face remained carved from granite. He stood there, seemingly devoid of emotion, though his eyes betrayed a deep, internal war. He was a Kennedy, a man who believed in honoring women, yet here he was, dragging a woman into their feud. The mediator tried to intervene. "Henry, do not burn in the fire of revenge. It will yield nothing. Blood will only beget more blood. This cycle will never end." Henry looked at the mediator, then cast his eyes toward the ceiling as if seeking divine judgment. When he looked back, his resolve was hardened steel. "The decision is mine, sir," he said with finality. "I want the girl as the blood price, or else—" The threat hung in the air. The Smiths sat wounded and vulnerable. The Kennedys stood like an immovable mountain. The townspeople shifted uneasily. They knew if this war didn't end here, the streets would run red. "Henry!" the mediator's voice boomed. "I warned you. I tried to stop you. Now the decision will follow the law of the land." Henry stared coldly at the old man. "I have given my verdict. I want the girl." The mediator sighed, looking out over the crowd. When one family begs for forgiveness and offers payment, but the other insists on retribution, justice demands a balance. He turned to Michael. "Michael Smith, your property could be seized, and you could be exiled if you do not accept this settlement." Panic rippled through the Smith family. Women began to sob quietly. The men's faces turned ashen. Sweat beaded on Michael's forehead. "This is injustice, sir," Michael's voice cracked. "My daughter, she's so young. How can she—" "The council has spoken," the mediator said firmly. "If you want to save your son's life and you're standing in this town, you must accept this marriage. The Kennedys lost a child. You must give a child. That is the demand of justice." There was murmuring among the Smith men, but none dared challenge the decree. The Kennedy name was too powerful. To defy them meant losing everything: land, reputation, identity. Henry, his hands still clenched, straightened and scanned the rows of Smith women with predatory focus. "Where is Lara Smith?" His voice held no softness, no emotion. He was simply concluding a business transaction. Chaos erupted among the Smith women. Some buried their faces in their hands, others clung to Michael. Tears welled in Michael's eyes as he looked at the crowd one last time. But the gavel had fallen. "Bring Lara." It wasn't a decision. It was a sentence passed on an innocent soul. Everyone saw a murder resolved, but no one saw the tragedy of the girl paying for a crime she didn't commit. Sunlight flooded the hall, but a heavy gloom persisted. Moments later, a hush fell. From behind the curtain of women, a slight figure emerged. Dressed in a black t-shirt and jeans, with a cap pulled low, she looked frail. Her steps faltered, her eyes were glued to the floor, and her face was pale with terror. Flanked by her mother and aunt, she walked as if the ground might open up and swallow her whole. Every step was a tremor. She had never imagined she would be dragged into a public hearing like this. A space was cleared next to Michael. As she sat, she seemed to shrink into herself, her slender fingers gripping the brim of her cap, her eyelashes fluttering nervously. This was Lara Smith, the darling of her father and brothers. Today, because of one brother's sin, she was being sacrificed. On the other side, behind a white partition set up for the ceremony, sat Henry Kennedy. He sat with a traditional stillness, his face a mask. The officiant began the vows, the weight of every word pressed down on the hall. "Lara Smith, daughter of Michael Smith, do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Lara's body shuddered. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Tears slipped from her eyes, soaking into her cap. Her mother placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, but Lara felt her heart stopping. "I do." The voice was so faint it dissolved into the air. "Lara Smith, daughter of Michael Smith, do you take this man?" This time, a hiccup of grief escaped with her tears. She could barely breathe. "I do." Her voice was wet, broken, defeated. "Lara Smith, daughter of Michael Smith, do you take this man?" Squeezing her eyes shut, summoning every ounce of courage left in her soul, she whispered, "I do." The officiant turned to Henry. "Henry Kennedy, son of Zulfikar Kennedy, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Henry took a deep breath. His expression remained unchanged. "I do." 3 times the question was asked. 3 times he answered with rock-hard solemnity. No hesitation. The decision had been made long ago. The officiant raised his hands for prayer, the sound of muffled sobbing from the women providing a haunting backdrop. Lara's world had changed forever, a reality she couldn't yet comprehend. The moment the ceremony concluded, Michael started to speak, but Henry was already moving. He stood up abruptly, silencing the room. Without a second's delay, Henry marched over, grabbed Lara's delicate wrist, and yanked her to her feet. She gasped, her eyes wide with terror, but resistance was futile. Henry fixed a cold, undeniable glare on Michael Smith. "It would be best if you kept no contact with us," he said, his voice dropping to a glacial temperature. "Consider this girl dead. She belongs only to our family now. For your own safety, stay away, or I will kill your son in a way that your descendants will remember for 7 generations. He didn't wait for a response. He didn't look back. Lara tried helplessly to twist her wrist free, but his grip was iron. He walked fast, practically dragging her toward the waiting car. Behind them, Michael Smith stood paralyzed by helplessness. The women wailed, and the townspeople watched the injustice in silence. The car door slammed shut. Moments later, the vehicle was tearing down the road, kicking up dust, severing the girl from her past forever. Henry Kennedy didn't know that the girl he had just abducted, though innocent in appearance, hid a rebellious storm within her. He had shoved her into the car with such force her head nearly struck the dashboard. As the car sped toward the Kennedy estate, Lara exploded. "What is wrong with you?" She whipped around, glaring at Henry. Henry, focused on the road, paused for a split second. He glanced at her in surprise. The girl who had sat silently in the meeting was now screaming at him. "Why did you push me like that? Who do you think you are?" she yelled, her large eyes burning with fury. The dormant Lara had awakened. Her pride would not accept this humiliation. A vein throbbed in Henry's temple. He snatched her arm, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "Shut up." Lara narrowed her eyes, incredulous. "Why should I shut up? Tell me, what crime did I commit? My brother killed someone, so why am I being punished?" She wrenched her arm free, leaving Henry stunned by her audacity. Henry gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He hadn't imagined a girl who would question his judgment, who would speak so fearlessly. "Silence!" he roared, accelerating. He wasn't a man who hit women. His plan was simply to hand her over to his mother. But this girl was making his blood boil. Lara laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. "Go ahead, silence me. That's all a man like you can do, right? Masculinity only shows in giving orders, doesn't it?" Henry's vision blurred with red rage. He slammed on the brakes, punched the dashboard, and turned to her coldly. "Enough, girl. Do not test my patience. You want to see my masculinity? Wait until we get home. I'll show you exactly what that means." He thought fear would silence her. He was wrong. Yeah, that's all one can expect from a Kennedy," she sneered, crossing her arms. "Half-witted brutes with no sense or logic. Someone else sins, and I pay the price. What will you do? Lock me up? Hit me? Cut out my tongue to satisfy your ego?" She laughed again, settling back into her seat defiantly. Henry didn't even look at her. He clamped his jaw shut and floored the gas pedal. Behind them, a convoy of Kennedy cars followed. The men thought they were bringing home a prisoner. They didn't know they were escorting a hurricane that the Smith family had secretly prayed to be rid of. Silence reigned in the car, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the heavy, pressurized silence before an explosion. The lights of the mansion appeared in the distance. As the car pulled into the porch, Lara sat with her arms crossed, glaring at Henry as if planning her next scene. Henry stepped out and opened her door. "Get out." Lara leaned back, crossed her legs, and looked at him with utter nonchalance. "Why? I didn't want to come here. You brought me by force. You carry me out." She was baiting him. It was her defense mechanism, pushing people until they broke. Henry's brow furrowed. "I'm saying this once. Get out, or I will drag you out." Lara batted her eyelashes. "You always threaten. Can you do anything new, or does bullying just make you feel big?" Henry's patience evaporated. He grabbed her wrist and yanked. "Let go, you brute!" she shrieked, but Henry didn't care. He hauled her out of the car. "You better get this through your head," Henry hissed, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "You belong to me now. Only me. And I don't cherish my possessions. If something hurts me, I break it and throw it away." "Is brute force the only thing you people know?" she yelled, struggling against his grip. "You think I'm scared?" Henry leaned in, his eyes bloodshot and terrifying. "If you say one more word," he snarled, "I will rip your tongue out and feed it to the dogs." The graphic threat made Lara freeze. Her eyes went wide. For the first time, genuine fear flickered in her chest. Henry's grip was bruising, his face a mask of cruelty. "Move," he growled, dragging her toward the heavy oak doors. Lara's tongue was stilled, but her eyes darted around, looking for an escape. The doors flew open. Henry stormed into the grand foyer, dragging Lara behind him. His mother, Julia Kennedy, sat in a high-backed chair, surrounded by family members. Henry shoved Lara forward with such force that she stumbled and fell at Julia's feet. Her head missed the corner of a table by inches. "Here is your criminal," Henry spat. "The daughter of the family that killed your son. Finish her. Do whatever you want with her." Lara gasped for air, scrambling to her feet. She dusted off her clothes and glared at Julia Kennedy. "How can you do this?" Lara demanded, her voice rising. "Am I a toy to be broken? A doll to be twisted however you please?" The hall went silent. Everyone stared. This girl, who had just been traded as a blood price, dared to speak? "I may be a captive," Lara shouted, stepping toward the matriarch. "But I will not be a victim. My brother killed him. Punish him. Why am I the sacrificial lamb?" Henry lunged at her, intending to silence her for good, but Lara darted back. "Stop, Henry!" The command cracked like a whip. Julia Kennedy stood up. Henry froze, fists clenched, chest heaving. He looked at his mother in disbelief. "Take her to Henry's room," Julia ordered the maid. Lara narrowed her eyes. "I'm not going anywhere." Julia fixed her with a sharp look. "You do not have the right to decide that." The authority in the older woman's voice silenced Lara. There was a power in Julia Kennedy that even Lara couldn't challenge. "No, Mother," Henry argued. "I need to fix her attitude right now." "Be silent, Henry," Julia said firmly. The maid grabbed Lara's arm. Lara shot one last defiant glare at Henry, a challenge that said, "I'm not done," before being led away. Henry stood trembling with rage, wanting nothing more than to destroy something. Julia walked over to him calmly. She took his wrist and, without a word, led him to her quarters. Her touch was the only thing that could ground him. Inside her room, Julia closed the door. "Sit, Henry." "Mother, don't lecture me," Henry snapped, pacing the floor. "I've made my decision. That girl won't survive me. She wants to be treated badly? Fine. You heard her tongue." Julia looked at him with a strange calmness. "Henry, if we punish someone's daughter today, remember that we have a daughter too. Sophie is in this house. Karma spares no one." "That is nonsense," Henry shouted. "Where was karma when I saw my brother lying in a pool of his own blood? Where was justice when he died in agony?" Julia pointed to the Bible on her nightstand. "The good book says oppression of the innocent is the greatest sin. The killer deserves punishment, not his sister. These are barbaric customs. If we do what the tyrants do, what is the difference between us and them?" "Those are just words, Mother," Henry seethed. "When they suffer, they'll know what vengeance tastes like." Julia placed a hand on his shoulder. "We are Kennedys. We have power, but power does not mean cruelty. Your father never harmed an innocent soul, and he died in peace. I want to die in peace, and I want the same for you. God favors the merciful. Forgive her. She is your wife now. Treat her well, because today she is a stranger, but tomorrow she could be the mother of your children." Henry's anger began to ebb, replaced by confusion. He took a deep breath, listening to his mother's wisdom. He knew she was right. Even when he demanded the bride, his heart had wavered, but grief had blinded him. Upstairs, Lara slammed the bedroom door and stomped to the center of the room. Her face was flushed, her breathing ragged. "What kind of hell have I landed in?" she screamed, collapsing onto the bed. She gripped her hair, tears finally spilling over. "This is all Samuel's fault. He killed a man, and I lose my life. My home, my safety. Gone." She stood up, pacing frantically. "No, I won't take this. I won't be a sacrificial lamb." In a fit of rage, she grabbed the pillows and threw them on the floor. She ripped the quilt off the bed. "I won't stay in Henry Kennedy's prison. I'll run away." Her eyes lit up. She grabbed the bed sheets, tying them to the window latch and throwing the end outside. A decoy. She quickly arranged the pillows on the bed, covering them with the quilt to make it look like a sleeping body. Then she slid under the bed frame, heart pounding. "I'll wait until they chase the ghost, then I'll slip out." She giggled nervously in the dark. "Henry Kennedy, you think you caught me? I'm Lara. My own father couldn't control me. You don't stand a chance." An hour passed. The door creaked open. Henry walked in. The silence of the room agitated him. He saw the figure under the sheets. "Stop pretending to sleep," he barked. "You think I'll spare you?" No movement. He laughed bitterly. "You will suffer just as my brother did." He ripped the covers back. Pillows. He stared for a second, then spun toward the open window and the dangling sheet. "Damn it!" he roared. He ran to the door and shouted into the hallway. "Guards! Lock the gates! She escaped!" Chaos erupted outside. Henry turned to leave, but stopped. He frowned. Something felt off. He paused, his instincts kicking in. Slowly, a smirk curled his lips. He walked to the sofa and sat down, crossing his legs. He pulled out a cigarette, lit it, and blew a smoke ring into the air. He knew. He could smell her perfume. He could hear the faint, terrified breathing from under the bed. Outside, his men were scrambling. Inside, Henry sat in silence, smoking, waiting. 20 minutes later, when the noise outside died down, Lara held her breath and peeked out. The coast seemed clear. She shimmied out from under the bed. As she stood up, dusting herself off, she froze. Henry was watching her, smoke curling around his fingers. "Great performance, wifey," he drawled. "But don't insult my intelligence. I'm always 4 steps ahead of you." Lara's heart stopped. The hunter had been waiting in the trap. Henry stood up, crushing the cigarette. "Got the running out of your system?" Lara crossed her arms, looking away, refusing to speak. Henry laughed. "Come here." She eyed him suspiciously, then ignored him. "Okay, you won't come?" He walked toward her slowly. Lara stepped back, her bravado failing. Henry grabbed her arm. "If you want to survive here," he whispered, his face inches from hers, "act like a human being." "Why?" she snapped, trying to pull away. "I'll live how I want." "Oh, you think you have a choice?" Henry's grip tightened. "Listen to me closely, Lara. If my mother or my sister sheds a single tear because of you, I will end you." Fear flickered in her eyes. "This room is your boundary," he commanded. "Do not leave it. If you embarrass my family, I will teach you a lesson you won't forget." He released her arm with a shove and walked to the door. He paused, looking back at her fuming form. "This is just the beginning, wife," he said with a cruel smile, and slammed the door. The night was agonizing. Lara tossed and turned, hunger gnawing at her stomach. She hadn't eaten in 24 hours. By morning, the hunger was unbearable. She slipped out of the room. The hallway was quiet. She crept downstairs, following the scent of coffee and vanilla. She froze in the kitchen doorway. Julia and Sophie were there. Sophie was flipping pancakes. Julia was pouring coffee. The scene was so domestic, so normal, that Lara felt a pang of guilt. They looked up. Lara cleared her throat, blushing. I'm hungry. I haven't eaten." Julia looked at her for a long moment, then smiled. "Sit down. I'll get you a plate." Lara sat, stunned. She expected hatred. Sophie placed a stack of pancakes in front of her silently. No malice, just simple hospitality. Lara ate, the food tasting like heaven. Julia sat down across from her with a cup of coffee. Lara looked down at her hands. "Last night," she started, her voice barely a whisper. "I was very rude to you. I'm sorry." Julia reached out and patted Lara's hand. "It's okay, child. Everyone makes mistakes. Realizing them is what matters." Lara looked up, tears stinging her eyes. There was no anger in the matriarch's face, only grace. "Come, Sophie," Julia said, standing up. "Let her rest. She's been through a lot." As they left, Lara sat alone in the kitchen, the weight of her own prejudice crumbling. A week passed, a week of silence. Lara sat on the sofa, picking at her fingernails. The room was bathed in golden afternoon light. Henry hadn't spoken to her in 7 days. He came in to sleep and shower, but acted as if she were invisible. The mansion was peaceful, too peaceful. Julia and Sophie were kind, the staff was polite. The boredom was killing her. The door opened. Henry walked in, looking exhausted but carrying his usual aura of arrogance. He glanced at Lara, frowned, and walked toward the closet. Lara jumped up. "Finally! The master remembers he has a room." Henry ignored her, taking off his jacket. "What kind of husband are you?" she jabbered, following him. "You don't even ask how I am. It's been 7 days." Henry threw his jacket on a chair and walked into the bathroom, slamming the door. Lara stood there, mouth agape. "Oh, so that's how it is? I'm talking to walls now?" She stomped to the bed and sat down. "Arrogant jerk." Moments later, Henry emerged in sweatpants and a t-shirt, towel drying his hair. Lara stood up again. "Can you hear me now? Or are you deaf?" Henry walked past her to the bed. "Let me rest." "Don't ignore me," Lara shouted. "I am talking to you." Henry tossed the towel aside and glared at her with red-rimmed eyes. "If you know what's good for you, stay quiet and stay out of my way." Lara didn't flinch. "Or what? You'll eat me?" Henry lay down and closed his eyes. Lara grabbed a pillow and threw it at him. Henry's eyes snapped open. He looked at her, a dangerous glint in his gaze. "I am here," she yelled. "Notice me. I am not a ghost." She stormed to the other side of the room, muttering, "One day, I'm going to kill him." Henry closed his eyes again, a faint, amused smile playing on his lips. He had come home early because his mother insisted. "Go to her," Julia had said. "Life must go on. We cannot mourn forever." He was testing her, waiting for her to break the ice. Lara huffed and puffed, but the silence was unbearable. She walked over to the bed and sat on the edge. "Why are you ignoring me?" she asked, her voice trembling. No answer. "Henry?" Silence. Lara grit her teeth and grabbed his hand. Henry's eyes flew open. He looked at her hand on his, then up at her face. "I am your wife," Lara said, her voice wavering between anger and vulnerability. "You left me here for a week. You act like I'm nothing." Henry took a deep breath. Slowly, he turned his hand over, interlacing his fingers with hers. He pulled her slightly closer. "If you are my wife," he said, his voice deep and rumbling, "then give me my rights." Lara's breath hitched. She looked down. It was a moment of surrender. Relationships aren't built on running away. They are built on bending. "I forgave you the day my mother told me that cruelty to you would bring bad karma to my sister," Henry said softly. "But I wanted you to understand this bond yourself. I wanted you to accept it." Lara looked up. Her eyes held regret. "Forgive me." Henry smiled, a real, breathtaking smile that transformed his harsh face. "Forgiveness," he whispered, squeezing her hand, "is the only right that matters." Lara rested her head on his shoulder. The weight in her chest vanished. She had learned life's greatest lesson. You don't win hearts with ego, you win them with forgiveness.